He warned them. They didn't listen. And the man who understood the United States better than anyone in the Imperial Japanese Navy knew exactly how this war would end long before it actually did. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto was not a man driven by illusions. He had lived in America. He had studied its industry, its factories, its shipyards, its oil fields. He had seen the scale of American production with his own eyes, and he knew something many in Tokyo refused to accept. Japan was preparing to fight a nation whose industrial capacity was on a completely different level. Years before the first shots of the Pacific War, Yamamoto warned his own government what would happen if Japan fought the United States. These warnings were not vague, and they were not emotional. They were blunt calculations. According to testimony from Japanese diplomats after the war, Yamamoto told them that Japan could run wild for 6 months to a year, but beyond that, he had no confidence at all. His meaning was simple. Japan could strike hard at the start, but once America mobilized its industrial strength, Japan would be overwhelmed. This was not the kind of message Tokyo wanted to hear. Inside the Japanese government during the late 1930s and early 1940s, optimism and nationalism were far more appealing than mathematical reality. Many political leaders argued that victory depended on spirit and courage, not steel and oil. Yamamoto disagreed. He understood that modern war was not won by determination. It was won by resources, production, and the ability to sustain losses. He tried repeatedly to warn Japan's leadership. He highlighted America's automobile factories that could be converted to build aircraft. He pointed to US oil fields that dwarfed anything Japan had access to. He explained that American shipyards could produce new vessels faster than Japan could sink them. Japan, he emphasized, had none of that depth. Another statement attributed to Yamamoto, recorded by multiple post-war sources, reflected his frustration. He said that in a war against the United States, it would not be enough for Japan to seize islands like the Philippines or Guam. If Japan truly wanted victory, he said, it would have to march into Washington, D.C., and dictate peace terms in the White House, an outcome he clearly believed was impossible. Despite these warnings, Japan moved toward war. In late 1941, Yamamoto was ordered to plan the opening strike. He designed the attack on Pearl Harbor not because he believed it would bring victory, but because he hoped it would buy Japan time to negotiate, time to seek a settlement, time to avoid the long industrial war he feared. Pearl Harbor was devastating, but Yamamoto knew immediately that the attack had not achieved what Japan needed. The American aircraft carriers were not in port. The oil storage facilities were untouched. The machinery and repair yards were intact. The industrial base of the United States was untouched, thousands of miles away. And once America mobilized, it mobilized at a scale the world had never seen. Factories that once made cars now produced bombers. Shipyards that built merchant vessels now launched aircraft carriers. Oil refineries expanded output beyond anything Japan could hope to match. By 1943, the United States was producing aircraft, ships, and munitions in quantities that overwhelmed the Pacific. Yamamoto watched this unfold with the grim clarity he had shown before the war. He had predicted this outcome not because he had visions of the future, but because he understood the importance of industrial power. Japan lost 4 carriers at the Battle of Midway in 1942. This was a blow from which the Japanese Navy could not recover. Those ships, and the experienced aircrews who served on them, were irreplaceable. Japan simply did not have the oil, steel, or training capacity to rebuild the forces it lost. The United States did. By late 1942, new American carriers were already joining the fleet. New pilots were graduating with more hours of training than Japanese pilots would receive for the rest of the war, and American industry was accelerating, not slowing down. Inside Japan, these realities were difficult to accept. Many leaders continued to believe that courage and spirit could compensate for shortages in fuel, aircraft, and warships. Yamamoto disagreed. He believed that courage mattered, but without resources behind it, courage alone could not win a modern war. His understanding of American industry made him one of the few in Japan who recognized that time itself had become an enemy. The longer the war continued, the stronger the United States became and the weaker Japan grew. By early 1943, the Japanese Navy was losing experienced aviators faster than it could train replacements. Fuel shortages forced pilots to limit flight hours. Ship losses mounted. American submarines were sinking Japanese transport ships, cutting off vital supplies across the empire. Yamamoto saw the trajectory clearly. If Japan could not secure quick, decisive victories, the outcome was predetermined. In April 1943, Yamamoto planned an inspection tour of bases in the Solomon Islands to boost morale among frontline troops. He was still respected and admired throughout the Navy, but his presence came with risk. The United States had broken Japanese naval codes. American intelligence intercepted Yamamoto's exact travel itinerary, including the time his aircraft would leave Rabaul and the location of his stops. A specially selected group of P-38 Lightning fighters took off from Guadalcanal. They flew at extremely low altitude to avoid radar. They navigated with precise timing and fuel calculations. Their goal was simple: intercept Yamamoto's aircraft and shoot it down. On the morning of April 18, 1943, they found him. The P-38s attacked the formation. Yamamoto's transport plane was hit and crashed into the jungle on Bougainville Island. The admiral who had spent years warning Japan about the risks of war with the United States died in the very conflict he believed Japan could not win. His death was a major blow to Japanese morale. Yamamoto had been a stabilizing figure in the Navy, respected for his intellect, his discipline, and his understanding of global power. Without him, the Japanese Navy lost its most experienced strategic thinker at a time when the empire could least afford it. In the years after the war, historians examining Japanese records and testimonies came to a consistent conclusion. Yamamoto understood the Pacific War more accurately than nearly any other Japanese leader. He recognized that the conflict was not simply a contest of ships, planes, or tactics. It was a contest of production, fuel, manpower, and industrial capacity. Japan could win battles. Japan could inflict damage. Japan could fight with tremendous bravery. But Japan could not replace its losses. The United States could. This was the core of Yamamoto's warning, explained by those who had known him before the war. He did not doubt Japan's courage. He doubted Japan's ability to sustain a prolonged conflict against a vastly larger industrial power. His death prevented him from witnessing the final stages of the war he had tried to avoid. But the outcome followed the path he predicted. Once the United States mobilized its full strength, Japan could not compete. Yamamoto's legacy today is not found in a single quote or in a missing diary entry. It is found in the testimonies of those who worked beside him and in the strategic decisions he made throughout his career. He understood the realities of the modern world, the importance of steel, oil, factories, and logistics. And he understood that no amount of tactical brilliance could overcome the limits of national production. If this story resonated with you, consider supporting the channel. A simple like helps these historical accounts reach more people who care about understanding the Second World War with accuracy and respect. And if you haven't already, subscribe to join our growing Foxhole community, a place committed to honest, clear, and meaningful stories from the war. We'd also like to know where you're watching from. Our viewers join us from every corner of the world, from students to veterans, all connected by a shared curiosity about history. Thank you for watching WW2 Foxhole, and thank you for keeping these stories alive.